Good afternoon and welcome to our free CKC webinar. We're so excited to have you join us. Today we're going to be talking about Chapter 5 of CRM or Die. If you have not joined us yet, I'm Courtney Kearney, founder and owner of C. Kearney Consulting. And we are a CRM and data management firm specifically focused on the architecture, engineering, and construction industry. Before we jump into the book content, I wanted to let you know that we have some great resources on our website, from blog articles. We have guest post articles from other authors as well. Definitely check all that out and be sure to look at our events. I assume that you know when our events are because you're attending one right now, but just in case you might not have been out there in a while, be sure to check those out. I know Eric is going to drop in the links to those here in a few minutes if she hasn't done so already. If you have not checked out the CRM or Die website, please scan this QR code and do so now. If you visit the website, you can obviously purchase the book, which we would love to have you do. It's not critical for attending the webinars or the CRM chats. However, it is great content. If you'd like a sneak peek at the content, then use this QR code, check out crmordie.com. You can also access book resources, spread the word, and last but not least, you can take a quick 10-minute CRM self-assessment quiz. We recommend taking this quiz on a regular basis, whether that's quarterly for you, biannually, so that you can gauge your progress on your CRM. That which is not measured cannot be improved. So you definitely want to take those snapshots of how you or your firm, you and your firm are doing on your CRM journey. Here's a little bit of sneak peek on what book resources you can get if you do purchase the book. We have additional downloads for you, anywhere from process mapping all the way through to digging in with those deep dive questions of what you can ask before you select a CRM, or interviewing your staff to get your process documented. Definitely check that out. Now, titling the book CRM or Die might seem extreme, but if firm leaders do not embrace the necessity that managing client relationships and that's vital to the firm, then the business will cease to exist. This was definitely exemplified when we read Kevin Hebblethwaite's quote that we risk an evaporation into irrelevance rather than sudden death. Most clients who depart do so without telling us. They quietly disappear. The really painful part is that could be happening to us right now without us realizing it. So definitely take action after what you hear today. We're focusing on preparation is key. So really the most important takeaway from the book, not necessarily from today, but from the book in all, is that CRM is not about a piece of technology. It's more about your process and your people. No matter the technology tool, it will fail if you do not have your process and your people in order first. Now, if you attended the first 4 webinars, the free webinars, they focused on the foundation of how to unlock your CRM potential. So quickly reviewing those webinars, we focused on the process and the people, understanding your firm's why and your data, your CRM and your data why, the importance of well-documented CRM, which documentation is going to come up yet again today. So if you've been following along on this webinar series, then be prepared because you're going to hear that word documentation again. Second, in February, we looked at data-driven decision-making, how and why data is the future, what it means to truly be data-driven. In March, we looked at the benefits of CRM, increasing profitability, bolstering productivity, improve efficiency, and boost morale. So that took care of the foundation piece. Now we're going to move and continue to move into preparation. We set up preparation last month in April, looking at Albert Einstein's quote, if I had an hour to solve a problem, I would spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and 5 minutes thinking about the solution. How this translates to CRM and data is that 90% of our effort should be spent on planning, preparation, and implementation, and the last 10% on maintenance. So that is why so much of the first part of the book is spent on understanding that planning and the preparation that goes into it. And the last piece of it is just maintaining things. Now, you might be saying, wait a minute, Courtney, I already have a CRM and you're talking about what I should have done before implementing. Not necessarily at all. Even if you've had your CRM system for a decade or more, all the things that we have talked about in the preparation piece can absolutely be done with an existing system. So don't check out on me. Don't feel like you have to throw up your hands and say, well, we just did it wrong. No, you absolutely can either hit pause or do some of the things that we're talking about today in succession with maintaining your system. So without further ado, let's jump into chapter 5, preparation is key. We had an unfortunate situation in a firm that I was working with where the CEO got a phone call and said, it seems as though 2 of your offices have submitted on the same proposal and the numbers were different. So do I pick the lowest bidder amongst yourself, or how does that work? Of course, the CEO was mortified and said, this absolutely can never happen again. We want to avoid nightmare scenarios like this. So how do we keep that from happening? Their solution was to turn to the CRM system and use workflow notifications triggered by geographic location to notify all the surrounding offices of what each office was pursuing so that that would never happen again. Now, yes, this is a painful situation. No one wants to have that happen. However, if you are in a boat where you have a painful situation that just happened, or a leader is embarrassed because maybe the square footage of a project was different in the resume and the project sheet and the narrative and the write-up and the picture, and those types of situations are avoidable with the right system and process in place. Lead into those pain points so that you can build off of that and use that as momentum to say, this is our why. This can never happen again. We absolutely cannot submit to the same pursuit from 2 different offices. We absolutely cannot misrepresent our project stats, because then the client might think, if we can't even get the number right in a proposal, how are we supposed to design it or engineer or build it correctly? So really looking at those mistakes or those pain points, leaning into those is a good place to start when you're preparing, because that is real and tangible and that is felt with emotion. Now, if you don't have a CRM system, one of the very first places to start is not by Googling, what is the best CRM system for AEC? No, instead, you've got to look internally. If you already have a CRM system, you still need to look internally. Do you understand how your data needs to be categorized? Essentially, how do you want to slice and dice your data? In that previous example of that firm that submitted to the same pursuit, for them, they had to tag all of their data by geographic location and mark which office was going to be pursuing that. So territories was a big deal, as was the region that the project was in. These became required fields, whereas before they weren't. Those workflows would not trigger and would not work effectively if that data was not populated. So looking at how you want your information to be reported out is another way of thinking about slicing and dicing. Now, you could do this by, I want to see all of the projects in a certain project type, in a certain category, in a certain market. In order to report out those things, you have to first have the category that exists and then have it populated. So you definitely want to take time to think about what are the things that we are getting asked? How should we be reporting on our information? This requires you to focus internally first so that everybody's on the same page, especially when it comes to things like naming conventions of categories. Are we going to call it higher education? Are we going to break it down through, just education? Do we need a K through 12? Do we need a higher education? When we're looking at healthcare, is it just the tag healthcare, or does it need to be MOB and hospital and OR and ER? And how do we want to categorize that information? And we need to be on the same page as far as what those categories are. Now, if you have a report that you live and die by, then start with the end in mind. One good way to look at this is the AIA A305, the 3.4 in progress jobs, and the 3.5 completed in the last 5 years. This is a common report or a common form that you have to fill out if you're a contractor. I know that SF330s are popular on the other side, the AE side. So definitely look at some of those forms if you want to start with the end in mind, and you look at those categories and you say, well, in order to know what is in progress, I need every project to have a status. How are we going to keep that up? How are we going to know when a project is complete? Every form for that has to have the architect and the prime and the references. So do we have all of those pieces? Do we have all of those categorizations? So really looking at how you're grouping that information, all of the information that goes into those forms, you've got to have fields associated with them, and then you've got to make sure that they are kept. Now, one of the things that we can take from that example of the 2 offices submitting to that 1 pursuit is that we do need to get to the root of the issue. We can't just fly off the handle and say that can never happen again and then try to go fix. Well, you might be putting a Band-Aid on it and not actually getting to the root issue. For that firm, the root issue was the lack of communication across offices, the lack of transparency. So they had to lean on technology to help with that. Now, sometimes a root issue is something very different. It might be something like we have got to have better communication between BD and marketing, or the sales team, BD and marketing, and operations, because things are dropping between those two. Maybe it's something like the client told you something during the pursuit that didn't get communicated to operations. And now the client is frustrated because they're having to repeat themselves. Don't you guys talk to each other? Same thing with there might be a discrepancy between accounting and marketing and the handoff of when a project goes into there, and then operations is entering information in the accounting system that's not getting to marketing. So marketing is asking seemingly double entry questions when they're just not getting that information. So really take the time to drill down and get to the root issue, whether that is your data is being double entered somewhere and that's causing frustration. If it's the lack of communication or siloed information, definitely take the time to get to the root of that issue. Now, here's that word you've heard every month since we started the book series is documentation. Documenting how data flows through your business is a great way to expose those silos, to expose that root issue, and really get to a place where you can have it down on paper and everybody can see this is how the data is flowing through our company. So it's taking something like a project from the start to the finish, the life cycle of a project. So we hear about a project, it goes into the CRM. This is how, this is where, this is when, this is why, this is who's updating it. And then when it's converted this is who's notified: accounting, IT, operations. This is the information that's transferred to that system, or this is the information that's given to whoever's going to enter it in that system. So at the very least, they can copy and paste out of that email into their system so they're not double typing. Looking at when that project hits those milestones. At 25%, we review the scope. At 50%, we review other data fields. At 75%, we start working on photography. Whatever those milestones are, making sure that everybody knows who needs to be notified, what do these milestones trigger, and then of course you want to get BD back into the loop so that they can continue to nurture that relationship well after the project is complete. When does that happen? Just getting that process down on paper allows you to see if there's silos, where are the breakdowns, where is the data being collected, who has the data, who should be entering it where, and then you can discuss, maybe we need to change some of our process, maybe we need to change some of how this information flows. So really looking at getting it down on paper is critical. This is the example that I gave last month. So really just getting it down on paper sets those expectations of who should be doing what should be triggering when, and it helps to build that accountability, which leads to increased user adoption. And documentation is just one way to help with the barriers to effectively using a CRM. If you haven't checked it out yet, SMPS released a report called Marketing 2022. If you are an SMPS member, this report is free to you. If you are not, then you can purchase it. Erica is going to drop the link in. But one of the things that they asked is, are you using a CRM? Over 75% yes. But then they asked, are you effectively using a CRM? And there was a resounding no for the majority. Then they asked, what are the barriers? Why aren't you effectively using your CRM? And the answers vary from the principal sellers do not enter the data, upper management does not require the use of the CRM, BD staff, BD and marketing does not enter it, difficult learning curve, and so forth and so on. What you'll notice is that the top three are all around behavior. So now we're going to take some time to focus on change management to help with that behavior piece, to help with how do we get our seller doers to enter the data? How do we get upper management to require it? How do we get BD and marketing to enter the information? It's all around change management. Now, we know that there are tons of change management philosophies out there. There's ADKAR, McKinsey, the Lewin model. All of these are absolutely usable. If you have a change management in place surrounding one of those, absolutely use it. Chaz and I, when we were researching the book, we liked Kotter's 8-step process. These 8 steps relate to creating a sense of urgency. You've got to have a deadline. Or every time it's going to be pushed to the end. So by our annual meeting, we are going to have the documentation in place. By Q2, we're going to have a CRM selected. By Q4, we are going to have all of our project data up to date. Whatever that looks like, make sure that there's a deadline, that there is a sense of urgency. Step 2, form the right team, or what Cotter calls the guiding coalition. Now, the right team is usually made up of people across departments, across hierarchy. So you've got a high-level champion that might not have very much to do as far as logging into a CRM system. However, they have buy-in and that credibility that brings attention that you need from that top leadership. Then you go to step 3, which is to form a strategic vision. This is something like your why, your CRM and data why. For the example that I started the webinar with, their strategic vision was, we are going to use our CRM system so that this can never happen again, so that we can have transparency and communication across offices, so that we can break down silos. Whatever that strategic vision is for you, make sure that it is well documented and well understood by all of your end users and all of your employees. So that strategic vision for your CRM and data management should be a part of your onboarding when new employees start, so that everybody understands, even if they don't have a login to the CRM, the information that they enter in accounting or the information that they enter in their Outlook all flows back to what marketing uses to sell your projects, to sell your experience, and keep the lights on by winning more work. The fourth step, enlist a volunteer army. So Cotter talks a lot about inviting people in to the cause. So once you've got that strategic vision, inviting them in to, hey, would you like to review our data flow so that you can have input? One example that I like to talk about is that I never thought about including IT on win notifications. It wasn't until I was giving a presentation and the projector broke, and so IT was in the room helping me. And I was talking about win notifications, and they said, can I be included on that email? And I said, absolutely, but can I ask why? Again, get to that why. Turns out they didn't know when we would win projects, and they would have superintendents in their office going, why isn't my trailer set up? Why don't I have XYZ out at the job site? And they went, we don't even know what job you're talking about. So getting the win notification allowed them to be proactive and seek out those staff members and say, what do you need at this job? When do you need it by? So just thinking about that volunteer army, and just don't count someone out. Make the ask. You never know if they're going to say yes and why, and get to the bottom of that. Step 5, enable action by removing those barriers. So thinking about those barriers in the marketing 2022, maybe you're set on change management and the behaviors part of it, and maybe your barriers are further down that list, and you can definitely try to attack those and be upfront with those barriers. If you don't have a CRM and you are going to be implementing one, definitely remove the barriers before they even form. Address people that are the naysayers, just head on. Just go ahead and say, okay, John, what you got for me? Why is this going to be a problem? Why is this not going to work? If you address their problems first, then you can get them on board quickly, which is very helpful and powerful if they become an advocate instead of a blocker. Turning a blind eye to those, they will just get louder and louder and louder and hurt all of what you're trying to do. So just turn around and face them and say, what do you got? I want to hear it. Let's tackle this together. I hear you, yes, that's frustrating. What if we change these fields? What if we make these required? What if I change this? Then you get them on board, and maybe they just haven't taken the time to understand why. Why do we need the contact email required? Well, John, we are sending out quarterly cost reports and our clients rave about them. Well, no one can get them if the email is not filled in, because all those emails go over to our email campaign, and that's how they're sent. We don't keep two systems up to date. Instead, we focus on this one and it pushes to that one. Oh, now John goes, that makes a whole lot of sense. Yes, I absolutely think that everybody should get that report. Then we look at the generate short-term wins. So looking at celebration. When we were writing the book, we spent some time understanding the neuroscience behind celebrating wins. I historically do not do a good job of this, but when you look at the neuroscience, the wires that fire together, or the synapses that fire together, wire together. So if you build in excitement around your CRM or your data processes, then your excitement will be around those tasks. So that is why you can be addicted to the games on your phone, because you get those dopamine hits of celebrating your level up, celebrating whatever that, short-term win is on the game. Do the same thing for your CRM. Yes, we cleaned 5,000 records this month. Congratulations. It can be something as small as an email to all of the users. Great job. This is what we accomplished. Keep going. But make sure that you celebrate those short-term wins to keep that momentum going. And then the 7th, sustain acceleration. A lot of times you get implemented and then you've had the system for 6 months, 8 months, and then you're like, oh, we can finally take our foot off the gas. Cotter argues that when you feel that, that's at the exact moment that you should absolutely put the pedal to the metal and accelerate. So whether that's accelerate one of those short-term goals that you've got, accelerate a piece of your implementation or what you're trying to maintain, because as soon as you feel the need or that relief moment of let's take the foot off the gas, he argues that that's the exact moment that you've got to do the opposite. And then finally, the 8, institute the change. Make sure that you are monitoring that change, respecting the behavior that goes around it, and just making sure that it is sustainable. In addition to change management, if you have bad data, we know garbage in, garbage out. The other barrier to address is distrusted data. A critical piece to this is QA/QC. As marketers, we all know that QA/QC is part of what our technical team does. We should be doing the same on our side. So quality assurance, quality control, that's what the QA/QC stands for. And it's critical when it comes to data integrity. It is vital to the success of your business data flow and the systems that you are utilizing. And the key comes down to the details. So things like naming conventions of company names. If you're bringing in information from your accounting system, is their naming convention the same as yours? Do you in the marketing department need to adopt accountings, or do you just need a place to push their name and then you control your own naming convention? Same thing with things like project naming conventions, the numbering system. Are you all using the same terminology? Does their contract type line up with your contract type? All of those things might seem so boring and so nuanced, but the devil really is in the details, and it is vital to get those and understand them. Same thing with quality over quantity. When you're populating data and you're thinking about the fields that need to be turned on or off in your user interface, it is about quality, not about the number of fields. We do not want to overwhelm our users when they get into the system. So think, what am I actually doing with this field? Am I using it to drive a data-driven decision? Is anybody reporting on it? If the answer to those two is no, turn it off. It can always be turned back on, but turn it off because you are after quality data that you're doing something with that's driving a decision rather than 50 fields that no one's doing anything with. Now, when we're looking at data specifically, you always want to remember that it is progress, not perfection. It is a journey with no end destination. There is always going to be data to clean. There's always going to be improvements in your system, in your process. It is never going to be picture perfect. It might be for one single day, for 1 hour, but it'll change in a minute as soon as another user is in the system. So just go in with the mindset of this is always a work in progress. This is always a journey. There is no, aha, woohoo, let's go. We're at the top of the mountain and we're done. We can sit and pinch our tent and never do anything again. That is not the case with CRM and data. So making sure that perfection is not your goal, that it is rather progress and incremental change and improvement. Now, to wrap up, what did we talk about over the last 30 minutes? That 90% of our effort should be spent on preparation with 10% on the execution. Start with the end in mind. Oh, this is a good one. Dig deep to discover that root issue. Don't just take it at the face value. Document your data flow. Understand change management. If you don't have a change management philosophy in place, think about adopting Cotter's or one of the others that are out there. Focus on the details. Really adopt the attitude of quality over quantity. Review those fields that you have turned on if you've had your system for quite some time. And then last but not least, when it comes to CRM and data, it's always about progress and never about perfection. This is your year. This is your moment. Take control of your CRM and your data and act now. We welcome you to our free CRM chat where we discuss the topics from today's webinar and much more. It's every third Thursday. So our next one is May 19th from 1 to 1:30 Central, and hope that you can join us. I know Erica's dropped the link in the chat so you can sign up for that. Thank you so much for spending this time with me, and have a great afternoon.